You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, themichigansportstruthpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them.
And welcome back to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, CastBox, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. It's been a very long time. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow the show on Twitter. You get the idea. You listen to the intro bumper. We're still on the Staples Network as well, so we're both being on that and Spreaker at the same time just to be more productive and staying as productive as we possibly can. We're also being more productive on social media once again, so we're trying to fill up our productivity cycle with the best of our abilities. So let's catch up on those topics on Spreaker. We got Steve Yzerman returning after the Wings take 6th overall in the NHL draft lottery. The entry draft is going to be in July sometime later after the Stanley Cup final. Ken Holland actually being fired instead of this fake multi-year contract extension as senior vice president. Chris Ilitch tried to lie to the media just to completely numb the pain mentally simply by giving the media nothing but softballs. We got the Pistons backing into the playoffs again and then getting swept by the Milwaukee Bucks before taking the 15th overall pick in the NBA draft lottery. Michigan and Michigan State in college basketball both getting beat by Texas Tech. Michigan State losing in the Final Four. Michigan losing in the Elite Eight. And then a month later, John Beilein leaves Michigan to sign with the Cavaliers as a head coach on a 5-year contract. Yikes. Also got the Lions NFL draft choices, including Hawkinson, Nada, Oweri, and Tavai, and the free agent signings, including Jesse James, Tyler Flowers, Connor Cook, Tom Savage. Cook and Savage are trying to work out for the backup quarterback position behind Matthew Stafford. And we got the Tigers' good April and bad May, leading to their 22-34 record, .393. 4th in the American League Central, 4th worst in the American League, and 5th worst in the majors. So, just to get you guys caught up on everything. So there you go. Now to the current news of the day.
For 3, yes sir!
Juwan Howard was recently hired as head coach. He played at Michigan from 1991 to 1994 and was a member of the Fab Five of that day. He was an assistant coach for the Miami Heat since 2013. He played 19 years in the NBA for 8 different teams total. He has no recruiting experience as a head coach. I'm not sure about his recruiting as an assistant coach for the Heat. His player development is a question up in the air as well. But recently, just earlier tonight, he hired former St. Joseph head coach Phil Martelli as an assistant head coach. You can do the homework on there. I'll do the homework in the ESPN mobile app as well. So, Juwan Howard is Mrs. Michigan. He was crying in his post game or in his introductory introductory press conference. He says he's excited and to be back, of course. He wants to bring a national title back to the University of Michigan for the men's basketball club program. So that's it. That's all the information you need to know on Juwan Howard, and you can dig that up, dig all that stuff about Phil Martelli later on or anytime you want. So there you go.
Left sideline, three, and he answers.
Speaking of Michigan, the Pistons have worked out Michigan freshman forward Ignas Brazdeikis, who is staying in the NBA draft. Pistons stand at 15th overall, like I mentioned before. The mock draft, we have two articles from The Athletic. One of them would be which prospect could be ready to contribute to the quickest, and that is freshman forward Keldon Johnson from Kentucky. He shot 38.1% from three last season. Which prospect has the most upside? Forward Romeo Langford from Indiana, that would be. 6'6", tall, with a 6'11" wingspan. He averaged 16.5 points per game, 5.4 rebounds as a freshman, 27.2% shooting from three the past season. Not very athletic or physical. So just that's all you need to know about Langford. If the Pistons traded back, who could it be for? It would be for forward KZ Okpala from Stanford, standing 6'9" tall with a 7'2" wingspan. He has improved by 14% in his three-point shooting from his freshman season to his sophomore season. He also has the ability to create offense off the dribble and play with noticeable body control. However, he has room for improvement on defense. So just another pick that only adds more offense without defense, and that's exactly what the Pistons are still lacking, the defense. A sleeping giant pick to the non-wing picks. Center Bull from Oregon. He has an impressive jump shot range, 52% from three, averaging 2.8 attempts. He's contrast to Andre Drummond, they say. A skinny body type hindered him from being a dominant post player. He relies too much on his jump shot. Defensively averaged 2.7 blocks per game. Not quite an impact player from the get-go, but a serviceable backup center behind Drummond. If the Pistons draft Bull or any center like him, they can either trade Drummond or just let him be an unrestricted free agent in the future. The safe pick would be center Daniel Gafford from Arkansas. Not as many offensive skills, but he's athletic, active, and plays with a meaning and desire. Last season, he averaged 16.9 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, and 2 flat blocks. The best point guard available. Nickeil Alexander-Walker from Virginia Tech provides size and length. He's a high IQ player. He averaged 38.3% from three. He lacks physicality and athleticism, but still versatile offensively. So those are your draft pick choices for number 15. Would you go with Brazdeikis, or would you go with either of those draft picks listed by The Athletic? These articles were written by James Edwards III. That would be on the 22nd of May and May 30th. So those are the options that James Edwards has besides Brazdeikis. Would you go with either Braz or Keldon Johnson, Okpala, Bull, or Gafford, or Alexander Walker? You choose. So, that's the Pistons.
Touchdown, Michigan!
Just a little Michigan Wolverines football news note. Running back Chris Evans has been suspended for the entire 2019 season due to academic issues. He was removed from the roster, so that's a dent in Michigan's offensive unit. heading into this fall, this late summer or to fall. So Michigan's going to have to make a replacement for Chris Evans. He gone.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Now the Lions player contracts that could be up for discussion before the regular season. That is written by Chris Burke of The Athletic. First off, let's go ahead and get to them one by one. Defensive tackle Damon Harrison. He has 2 years left on his contract, a $250,000 workout bonus, a cap number at $7 million for this year and $9.25 million for next year. The Lions could reduce at least the latter hit by signing him to an extension. Slotting in his value relative to his position league-wide can be slightly difficult from a mental standpoint. The highest paid defensive tackles like Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox, Geno Atkins, Gerald McCoy, Kawan Short, and Jarrell Casey all have track records as productive pass rushers and have been working on more lucrative deals than Harrison has. Harrison's target point might be Minnesota Vikings defensive tackle Linval Joseph, who signed an extension in 2017, 2 years ago, that works out to an average of $12.5 million a year from now through 2022. Second of all, defensive tackle A'Shawn Robinson from Alabama. He only averaged 32 defensive snaps per game, except he was excellent and only has 3.5 career sacks. You can compare, Chris Burke compares Robinson to in that contract to Jonathan Hankins, who just inked a 2-year, $8.5 million deal with $5.25 million guaranteed in Oakland with the Raiders. Number 3, offensive tackle Rick Wagner, who has the Lions' third highest cap hit for 2019 at $11.9 million, behind cornerback Darius Slay, which we'll get to momentarily, at $29.5 million, and quarterback Matthew Stafford at $15.9 million. Wagner has 3 more years in his contract, and he's the 4th highest paid tackle in the NFL in guaranteed money and 5th in total money, 5th highest paid in total money. An extension does not fit with Wagner, Burke says, already under contract through 2021, so the Lions have 3 options. They can discuss with him a pay cut, or they can, that's number 1. Number 2, they can release Wagner with a post-June 1st designation and eat $2.9 million of dead money, more of a 2020 option, or restructure his current deal to get him more guaranteed money, but a lower cap number now. Also noted, offensive tackle Taylor Decker's 5th-year option was already picked up, so Decker's cap hit will bump from around $3.5 million this season to $10 million next year. Now to quarterback Darius Slay, who signed an extension in 2016 worth $48 million for 4 years. He is owed a $12.5 million base salary this season after making just $2.7 million in base last year. Slay has 2 years left in his extension. He's a back-to-back Pro Bowler. The Lions look to let the extension sit until next offseason and might hold tight until 2020 down the road, with a franchise tag being an option. Slay as I mentioned before, gets paid a base salary of $12.5 million this year and $10 million next year. Now, what I've been hearing just minutes and hours ago, just a couple hours ago prior to this podcast, to this Spreaker episode, Darius Slay tells the Detroit Free Press that he decides to quote-unquote chill instead of attending Lions mandatory minicamps, and for that he will forfeit a $250,000 workout bonus, and the other thing, he's asking for a pay raise. There are 3 words to describe him for this:
You are pathetic!
Selfish, whiny, and lazy. As good of a cornerback he is, he cannot be starting to act like a diva like Antonio Brown did when he was for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Antonio Brown, a former Central Michigan Chippewa, got traded to the Oakland Raiders. So that's Darius Slay for you. Wide receiver Kenny Golladay produced 1,000 yards without much help last year and will earn less than $1 million this season. Marvin Jones at wide receiver has a cap hit for the next 2 seasons, and they are both each around $9.2 million. Offensive guard and center Graham Glasgow, a former Michigan Wolverine, deserves a raise, Burke says, because Glasgow missed only 1 snap total over the past 2 seasons each, or just 1 snap total over the last 2 seasons, while starting at guard and center, and he is in contract year limbo. The Lions would rather he not hit the market and instead keep him on the roster. To do that, you have to re-sign him or sign him to a contract extension. And finally, running back Theo Riddick. He was held on to by the Lions at around $4.1 million of a cap hit last season, and they think it's okay for them to have him at around $4.6 million this year, except he's coming off a season of 555 total yards from scrimmage and 0 touchdowns. The Lions would be on the hook of it. The Lions would be on the hook of it if they released him for nothing. Hence, his seemingly permanent spot on the perceived roster bubble. The alternative is to get his salary down from $3.45 million that he's at for this year. So those are the Lions' individual player contracts that Chris Burke thinks should be up for discussion. So we'll see what happens later on this offseason.
That one is long gone.
And finally, the Tigers. They have, like I mentioned before, they're 22-34, but just earlier tonight in the MLB draft on MLB Network, they have drafted outfielder Riley Green from Haggerty High School at 5th overall. He is the best pure high school hitter in the draft. ESPN MLB analyst Keith Law had him as his 6th overall prospect. In Green's senior season, he had a slash line of .422, .554, and .916. A .916 OPS, of .422 average, a .544 either on-base percentage or slugging percentage. Some people are saying that he's the next Nick Castellanos, meaning that Green may be great offensively, but not good defensively. We'll see what happens later on. His defense may need some work. So that's who the Tigers drafted, and that is all that I have for this episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast, which is also prime time on Blog Talk Radio under Mancini Sports on the Stables Network. Listen online at blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports. And if anyone is interested in sponsoring our primetime edition on the Stables Network, please email our fine producer Mark Mancini at mancinisports@yahoo.com. Check out our new website, the MichiganSportsTruthPodcast.com. Also, check out and like its verified Facebook, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast, and follow its Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram accounts at Michigan_Truth. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. Stay smart, Michiganders. TTFN, ta-ta for now, and hit 'em with a high.
The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them.
Mission complete.